Victoria Kitchell. Welcome to my studio, Kitchell Stitchery. Years ago, I was introduced to sewing by my mother, and now I'm addicted. I have two daughter-in-laws who have shown an interest in learning how to sew, so I'd like to share with them some of my experiences. I'd like you to join us as we go through some video series that I've created to teach them how to sew. We'll start with some very basic things, and then we'll move on to some more advanced techniques. I'm going to start with an overview of equipment and notions. I'd like to talk about some things that I think you need to have, and I'll also talk about some things that you may want to add as your budget allows. So regardless of your sewing skill level right now, I'd like you to become a more confident sewer, and I hope that this video series helps you to do that. So join me and my daughter-in-laws as we take this journey to learning how to sew. Let's get sewing. So before we get started on our first project, I kind of want to cover some basics, the things that you might want to get or need. So the first thing you're going to need is a sewing machine. There's three basic types of sewing machines, and it's an electronic, a mechanical, or computerized. So depending on your budget, do a little bit of homework before you go shopping for a machine, because it can be overwhelming when you get to the store. But let me show you what I have. I have a mechanical machine, which also happens to be an industrial machine. It also happens to have a walking foot on it. You can use this for canvas, for denim, for leather, a lot of different things. It's a real workhorse. It has all metal parts in it, but it just does straight stitching. So another machine that I have is not necessary, but it is kind of a nice little add-on, is a serger, and the serger allows you to do very professional, finished off seam allowances. My serger here has 4 threads, and you can do a 2, 3, or 4 thread stitch. So when we come to those areas, I'll show you a little bit more about how that works. You don't have to have it though. And then this is my everyday go-to machine, and this is a computerized machine. You can recognize it because it has a large display. All of the selections that I make are going to be on this digital display. It also has an embroidery machine that goes attached to it, but you don't have to have that as well. I'll talk about some of the features in it, but this is going to be the high end of any of the machines that we're looking at here. So when it comes to the basic notions that you're going to need, let me kind of cover feet first. The feet that you're going to get with your machine are probably going to be some basic ones. You're going to have a standard one that allows you to do straight stitch and zigzag. Hopefully you get one with a zipper foot and some kind of a button holder. You'll notice I have 2 different styles here because I have a couple of different machines. An additional foot that I would recommend would be a walking foot. You heard me mention that I have a walking foot machine, but this allows me to sew through some heavier fabrics. So I have those feet. Also you need to worry about or make sure that you have a good pressing tools. So a steam iron is essential. Something that's very good, reliable, and you can get a good blast of steam out of. I do use a little bit of starch just to kind of make my fabric easier to work with. And then you need a pressing surface. You'll notice that as we're working, my table itself is a pressing surface. So you don't have to have something that big. You can have something that's much smaller and easier to work with. Maybe your space is limited. So I have a pressing board that actually has a cutting board on the back of it, and I use that when I travel. And another pressing tool that you may want to look at is, this is a point presser. So when you're doing things that need you to turn your corners inside out, this is a nice little tool to have as well. So those are your pressing tools. So then you also need a good supply of needles. I would recommend that you pick up a universal pack of needles, and these will be for woven fabrics. You'll need to make sure that you kind of keep an eye on the description. This is for jersey. This means these are for knits. It's more of a ballpoint. And then there are some heavier needles that you may want to get if you're working with denim or heavier fabric. So again, just get I recommend a universal pack for now. You'll also want to get some hand sewing needles. These just get a variety of sizes. Comes in a nice little pack as well. And we won't be doing a lot of hand stitching, but there's a little bit that we're going to have to be working with. As far as pins go, I'm not going to recommend any one type. The benefit of a pin that has a glass top on it would be that it's not going to melt if you happen to get close to it with the iron. The longer pins would be for possibly quilting, where you have more fabrics that you need to hold together. Again, I would get the universal type there. I have two different types of pin cushions. I have a pin, the standard pin cushion, and then I have a magnetic pin holder. So whichever one you think that would be more conducive to the type of work that you do. Again, I keep my needles and some extra sewing needles in my pin cushion. The next is your cutting tools, and again, some basic things that you'll need is a pair of scissors for cutting paper. Some that you get that you use only for cutting fabric. And I have some thread snippers. Again, these are really easy to grab and snip my thread ends. You'll also need a seam ripper. We will be doing some unsewing. We make mistakes when we sew, so make sure you pick up a seam ripper. Then this cutting tool is called a rotary cutter. The way this works is there's a release on the blade. Blade pops out. You would use possibly your ruler, lay it on fabric, and cut fabric that way. If that's something that you feel you're going to use, this is not just for quilting, it can be for other types of sewing as well. So as I demonstrate these, I'm going to show different ways. If you don't have this equipment yet, again, this is something I'll show you different ways of doing and cutting your fabric. You'll need some marking tools. So I have a fabric marker. Make sure that it works for whatever fabric you're using. There's different types. There's markers, there's evaporating pens, and there's some that stay a little longer. You either take off with heat or you take off with water. Pencil I use primarily for patterns. I don't typically write on my fabric with a pencil. It's harder to get off. And then some type of, this I like, it's chalk. It has a little chalk wheel on it. So as I'm marking fabric, and I like yellow because yellow shows up on light colors. It also shows up on dark colors, but it comes in a variety of different colors. So I would recommend you get some kind of marking tools. The thread for now, all the projects we're going to work on in the beginning are going to be basic. So some kind of all-purpose or cotton thread I would recommend. Get just your standard colors, or you may want to pick one up as you pick up each project fabric to match your fabric. And then you'll have some bobbins. Again, your machine may take a specific type of bobbin, so make sure you read your manual and know what kind of bobbins, but get a couple extras and have them wound in the variety of colors to match your threads. We're going to move on to marking tools, and there's going to be a variety you're going to see me use during my sewing, because I've again been sewing for a while and I have collected quite a number of different marking tools. So I would say that you're going to need a tape measure, and you can get those in the little ones that pull out and snap back in. You're going to need a ruler, and I like this little plastic ruler. I use this a lot. I also use the bigger ruler that you saw me demonstrate with the rotary cutter. This is a thicker plastic. Again, this may be something, as you see me demonstrate, that you feel that you want to add to your collection. This is definitely a must. This is a seam gauge, and this allows me to measure, a lot of times I'll measure on my machine how far the needle is from the edge of the fabric, some other types of things, but this is very, very handy to have. So these are the basic things that I would recommend that you have with your, when we get started here. And then I want to talk a little bit about resources. There's a lot of books out there that you can get that talk about everything that I just mentioned in a lot more detail. So if you're really curious about some other types of pressing things, tools, or the specifics about pins and needles, there's some books out there that you can reference. The book that I'm going to be teaching this first series out of will be called The School of Sewing by Shay Henderson. I think this is a fabulous book for beginners, and it covers everything that I just talked about, including machines, how to thread your machine, how to get the bobbin wound, and all of that in this book. And then what we'll do is we'll talk about each project separately. So the first project in this book is making a pillowcase. So I have already made a pillowcase that demonstrates what we're going to be doing in the first project. So if you don't already have your book, I would recommend that you go to your fabric store or go to your craft store and pick up this book. It will be a great reference tool. If you don't decide to buy this book, then follow along and see which projects you might want to work on with us.